Anti-communism as a key tool to solve the dilemma of fake German guilt fell apart as the Soviet Union began its process of complete liberalization with eventual dissolution, and as China normalized relations with the US in 1979. The weakening of communist strength now enabled West Germany to annex the Soviet-aligned East Germany. After the so-called German reunification, the nation's narrative shifted. To quell fears surrounding the resurgence of a proud and revitalized German nationalism, a new story needed to be crafted. A story that would justify Germany's re-emergence as a proud, dominant imperialist power. For a time, communism had served as the convenient boogeyman, holding together the tensions of Germany's internal dilemma. With communism's collapse, something new was needed to fill the void: the threat of Islam. Following Germany's reunification in 1990, now having full sovereignty over foreign affairs, Israel looked at it with caution. In particular, the Zionists worried what would happen when the historically anti-Israel East Germany became part of West Germany. But there was no reason to be skeptical, as East Germany had fully succumbed to revisionism and softened its position on Israel over the past 10 years, with its parliament asking the Israeli people to forgive us the hypocrisy and hostility in the GDR's official policy towards the State of Israel. However, regained strength through German unification proved to be beneficial for Israel, with Germany remaining Israel's second largest trading partner after the US until 2009, when this position was taken over by the People's Republic of China. However, it was not reunification, but rather another event that brought the Holocaust back to the forefront of German-Israeli relations: the 1991 Gulf War. Several German companies had aided Iraq's chemical weapons program, and Saddam Hussein's missile attacks on Israel evoked Holocaust-era associations with Germany and gas. The German foreign minister flew immediately to Israel to give them aid worth over 80 million euros today, and the most costly German arms export to Israel up to that point. This helped a production gap in the crucial arms sector of German industry, which was also important politically to reach higher military autonomy. But this whole affair enabled Germans to yet again paint the Arabs as the true heirs of Nazism. Within a climate of rising Nazi terror attacks against Muslims or Muslim background people, one particular right-wing sect that called itself left-wing would congeal and increasingly start focusing on the threat of Islamism, calling themselves the Antideutsche, anti-Germans. Renewed German nationalism worried them, and the intervention in former Yugoslavia, the first bombs dropped by an active German Air Force on targets since World War II, reminded them of a renewed Hitler-like militarization. Some then went as far as supporting pan-Serbist ethnic cleansing against the Islamofascist threat in Bosnia and Kosovo, de-Germanizing the experience of fascism to associate it closer with the second largest religious community in the world. They would then go on to demonize the actual communists in Germany in support of the Second Intifada, referring to the fact that Hamas had a leading role in it, linking it to the narrative that many Muslims harbored fantasies of a renewed Holocaust. This mirrored the intensification of Islamophobia among many so-called leftists in other countries after 9/11 to find excuses for US imperialist invasion. Like Christopher Hitchens in the UK, who turned into a liberal hawk using the concept of Islamofascism to justify dropping American and British bombs on Muslims to spread the supposed higher form of Western civilization, which must defend itself from being destroyed by Islamist barbarism. One faction around the anti-German self-titled communist Gremlitsa said on the impending US invasion on Iraq that possible attacks on Israel by Saddam Hussein obliged the German left to agree to the fall of his rule with German military participation. Anti-German justification for German foreign policy now came full circle. It is why people say that the group should correctly be referred to as ultra-Germans or Germans on steroids. These people increasingly merged with the establishment so-called center-left parties and painted Palestinian political groups as right-wing and Israel as a left-wing project, in which they differed from neocons in the US. And that's about it with the differences. Again, this development might appear mystical to you, but it becomes clearer if you remember what we said in the beginning, that German talk about Israel is less about Israel and Jewish people, but about Germany. In particular, the struggle to revive and reimagine a weakened German chauvinism. Even German leftists who are critical of German nationalism will often proudly defend Germany's memory culture as superior to other nations, disregarding its hollowness and obvious whitewashing function and the material reality that Germany is the second biggest supporter of an ongoing genocide. And don't forget that undermining the actual left from a supposed left is a common phenomenon and tactic in all countries. We've already talked about one famous instance where that was the case in Germany, and the political role of representatives of the labor aristocracy in supporting capitalism imperialism. Joschka Fischer's successors in the Greens have not only continued the shift from a universalist understanding of the fascist past to a particularist one, but have become its most vicious defenders. Green politicians in leading positions, such as current Vice-Chancellor Robert Habeck or Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, belong to the most aggressive supporters of Israel's genocide and the staunchest slanderers of pro-Palestine activists.
Meine persönliche und politische Meinung ist, man kann die israelische Armee kritisieren für ein zu hartes Vorgehen im Gazastreifen. Das ist aber nicht Völkermord. Diejenigen, die Völkermord begehen würden oder wollten, wenn sie könnten, ist die Hamas.
Wenn Hamas-Terroristen sich hinter Menschen, hinter Schulen verschanzen, dann bekommen wir in ganz schwierige Themenbereiche rein, aber wir ducken uns davor nicht weg.
Und das darf man so übersetzen, dass der Slogan "From the river through the sea" nicht bedeutet, dass dann die Juden Israel per Boot verlassen sollen, sondern das ist eine Auslöschungsfantasie. Israel Völkermord vorzuwerfen, ist aus meiner Sicht eine komplette Verdrehung von Opfern und Tätern beziehungsweise falsch.
Dann können auch zivile Orte ihren Schutzstatus verlieren, weil Terroristen das missbrauchen. Dazu steht Deutschland und das bedeutet für uns Sicherheit Israels.
Under the propaganda of feminist foreign policy, Baerbock funds the mass slaughter of Palestinian women. Right-wing lunatic journalists join her in her imperialist white feminism. One leading social democrat wrote influential books openly advocating for Islamophobia and arguing against Muslim immigration. It took the so-called left-wing party 10 years to kick him out. Today, both parties mirror the right wing in arguing for increased deportations. One far-right AfD politician and Nazi granddaughter even applauded the Greens for their racist policies and referred to the theory of imported anti-Semitism. But more on that in the next part.
Dass selbst ein Teil der Grünen inzwischen AfD-Position übernimmt, das nennen wir eine Zeitenwende.
After unification, the aforementioned German philosopher associated with the Frankfurt School, Jürgen Habermas, was instrumental in promoting a victim-centered, guilt-oriented approach to Holocaust remembrance. Acknowledging the past should serve as a proof of responsible German citizenship. In this effort, the 94-year-old leftist drew heavily on the influence of his mentor, Theodor Adorno, the leading member of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, particularly in his firm stance against attempts to downplay or diminish the significance of the Holocaust. It turns out the probably best-known social scientist in Germany didn't learn his lesson. Just like the Germans who denied the genocide on Jewish people as it happened, he now denies that Israel is committing one, calling its war on Gaza principally justified.
Our moral, proper moral secular principles are sufficient in order to regenerate imbalanced social situations, and I shouldn't have to tell you what that means.
So you may ask, how can you read so many books about genocide, oppression, fascism, and hate, and still refuse to acknowledge a clear-cut case of genocide live-streamed on all devices? It's because you're German. But jokes aside, this dude put it slightly better. German political philosopher and historian at Princeton, Jan Werner Müller, who highlighted a profound paradox in Habermas's attempt to transform Holocaust remembrance into a form of negative nationalism, a kind of anti-nationalist nationalism. Quote, "According to this view, Auschwitz was willingly recognized as a singular crime, but at the same time, this crime was jealously guarded as unique, almost metaphysical act which, yet again, had made the Germans a special people. Also, there was a cunning, quasi-Hegelian drive inherent in the view that Auschwitz had enabled the Germans to know themselves, or rather, their mythical essence. This nationalistic framework in Holocaust memory, even the negative kind, gave German politicians the perfect excuse to turn reckoning with Nazi atrocities into a celebration of national pride. As German President Joachim Gauck put it in a speech, quote, "There is no German identity without Auschwitz." I actually agree with Joachim here, but for different reasons. So calling this whole affair a memory failure is not entirely correct. The hollowness of German memory culture is deliberate, arising from the systemic impetus to not properly deal with the essence of European fascism, arising out of a continuity with colonialism, then capitalist imperialism, using anti-fascist slogans to justify the support of current fascism, and as a cover-up for one's own genocidal warmongering. When SPD Gerhard Schröder came to power at the turn of the 21st century, he played a crucial role in transforming the notion of dealing with the past into an honorable quality of German society. Schröder tellingly declared in an interview that the new generation's readiness to confront their history would empower them, and that it created, quote, "an opportunity to represent one's own interests in a more uninhibited manner." In 2008, 3 years after taking office, Angela Merkel held a speech in the Israeli parliament, the first ever by a German chancellor, where she declared, quote, "This historic responsibility is part of the Staatsräson of my country." Memory and atonement for the Holocaust now became the basis for the post-war German social contract, a new collective national pride at having come to terms with the past better than any other nation. Yes, I am not kidding you. Being German now meant your voice matters more on all things related to anti-Semitism and genocide.
Importierter Hass, Antisemitismus auf Deutschlandstraßen.
Wir haben es hier mit einer extremen Form des
So what if you're in Germany and you're not German, or if you don't look like a white German? Well, this means that you have yet to earn this badge of German pride. In the next part, we will learn how Germany, home to the largest Palestinian diaspora in Europe, launched an offensive on activists and migrants, not only through violence, but also through painting them as the new carriers of anti-Semitism. We will look concretely how self-declared leftists have established themselves in dominant media and state institutions to wage a propaganda war akin to conspiracy theory lunacy, invoking concepts of imported or post-colonial anti-Semitism to serve the needs of an increasingly reactionary capitalist regime and its project to outsource its fake Nazi guilt to Muslims.
Ehren wir die Freiheit, arbeiten wir für den Frieden, halten wir uns an das Recht, dienen wir unseren inneren Maßstäben der Gerechtigkeit, schauen wir am heutigen 8. Mai so gut wir es können, der Wahrheit ins Auge.